January 12, 1945. The Soviets launch a major offensive on the Vistula that completely overwhelms the German defenses, bringing them to within a few miles of Berlin by the end of the same month. In the midst of this military disaster, in which the German army was unable to contain the new Soviet investida, Himmler was appointed commander-in-chief of the Vistula Army Group for January 24. His orders were to stop the retreat of all German units, and thereby stop the Soviet offensive, and go on the counterattack as fast as he could. We already analyzed in another program that I leave you in the description, how Himmler's military performance was during this critical situation, because today we are going to see one of the conversations that Himmler had with one of the best generals of the German army, this being the famous Imminent Raus. Without a doubt, this dialogue that we are going to see next will help us to know the generalized thinking that many of the German generals had, who, like Raus, had been fighting since the beginning of the war. In addition, it will help us to understand firsthand what the state of the German army was like in 1945, and what were the reasons for its final defeat. This meeting between the two men took place during the night of February 13th, this date being a few days before the Germans launched one of their last offensives on the Eastern Front, known as Operation Solstice. After they had dined and discussed daily matters in the presence of different companions, Himmler and Raus went into a room to speak in private. The first topic to be discussed was the offensive that was being prepared from Pomerania to the south, in an attempt to defeat all the Soviet vanguards that had established themselves along the Oder. But once again, the German offensive was very ambitious in relation to the inequality of forces between them and the Soviets. Himmler asked Raus what was his assessment of this operation, also asking him to be completely honest. The German general told him that this offensive was crazy and that from the second day, the advance would be paralyzed without having achieved any results. His advice was that those troops had to be used in defensive actions, instead of being sacrificed in a futile attack. Himmler then told him that he was of the same opinion as him, but that Hitler had ordered the attack and the order had to be followed until its last consequences. After assessing other attacks that the German army was also going to carry out in the vicinity of Lake Balaton in Hungary, in which Raus's advice was the same as in the previous case, the German general decided to tell Himmler everything he thought. "Herr Reichsführer," Raus said, "allow me to express my honest opinion about everything that has happened during these years in which we have been at war, to the man who has the most influence over our leader. The statements I am going to say next may land me in jail or the gallows, but I still have to do it." After these first words, Himmler gave him permission to continue speaking. "Since Stalingrad, our direction of operations has planted serious hardships in the minds of all of us. And over the past few months, our uncertainty has only increased. From the first moment it was seen that it was impossible to fight on a front whose length exceeded 3,000 kilometers, and that our armies did not have the capacity for this task, but even so, we have done it for the last 2 years. Our forces have done nothing but tense until they have ended up breaking. During this war of attrition, our armies have been completely depleted, and we have lost numerous allies who have also been crushed by the Soviets. If we have managed to continue fighting for so long, it has been thanks to the courage and tenacity of our frontline officers and soldiers. The High Command has not drawn the conclusion that this war has long been unwinnable, and has continued to send large German formations into battles that were unwinnable. This waste and senseless loss of life has brought us to the brink of the abyss in which we find ourselves today. Furthermore, all those generals who try to avoid this disastrous situation find themselves tied hand and foot and have no freedom to lead their troops independently. Instead, they can only limit themselves to carrying out impossible orders that are ordered from the High Command of the army. As if that were not enough, after failing to carry out one of these orders, they are dishonorably discharged, as if they were incompetent officers." After these first words, Raus stopped to see Himmler's reaction, and whether or not he proceeded to order his arrest. However, Himmler looked at him and told him to continue exposing him. After this, Raus continued talking about the way to act in the different military operations. Instead of organizing an aggressive strategic defense in previously selected and prepared suitable sectors, the only strategy ordered from us is not to give up a single meter of land despite lacking strategic value. As for the concentrations of troops that we managed to make as reserves, these are always launched in unimportant local attacks, which are wasted again and again. Raus then alluded to the disastrous offensive at Kursk, in which the best of the German army was thrown into a wall, only to face numerous Soviet counterattacks from all sides. Raus also complained that they were not allowed to build defenses in the rear, to which they could retreat to stop the Soviets more effectively, and that because of this, when the Red Army broke through the German front line, the German front line completely fell apart. The next point Raus focused on was the so-called fortress cities. Raus commented that desperate and hopeless battles take place in them, in which both the position and the garrison are lost, without any strategic value. This made the distrust of the army towards the high command ever greater. There have already been many sectors of the front that have been totally surrounded and that have had to slowly succumb to their total destruction. Whether in the Caucasus, in the Crimea, in Courland, or in East Prussia, entire armies have been encircled and we have lost them in their entirety. At the same time that we foolishly lose combat-experienced units, we have to send other divisions to the main front that have been created on the spur of the moment and lack combat value. Naturally, these troops are unable to face the vanguard of the Red Army, which after annihilating our weak divisions, continue advancing. Raus also commented that to this weakness of the German army units, we had to add the Allied domain of the skies, which in addition to preventing the production of weapons and ammunition, also made it very difficult to move to the front, so many German units were virtually out of stock. Finally, the German general finished by saying that taking all this into account, it was not very clear that Germany could be victorious and that they were facing almost certain defeat. Here we have to point out that Raus obviously knew that the days for Germany were numbered, but he wanted to say it in the softest way possible. When he finished his presentation, Raus remained silent together with Himmler, who stared at him for a couple of minutes without saying anything. Subsequently, and to Raus's surprise, Himmler approached him and said that he agreed with him. Totally euphoric, the German general, who had seen that his point of view was shared by Himmler, told the Reichsfuhrer, "So, if you know all this, why haven't you informed Hitler?" Himmler told him that he had told the German leader all this a long time ago, but in doing so, he accused him of being a defeatist and pointed out the door for him to leave his presence. Although Raus did not know at the time whether what Himmler was telling him was true or not, this event was later confirmed by another officer who had been present at those discussions between Hitler and Himmler. Then the conversation returned to the new offensive that was being prepared in Pomerania, which according to Himmler, had to be launched yes by order of Hitler and was finally launched on February 16th. However, just as Raus had calculated, the attack was completely stalled for the next day. Well, I sincerely believe that after this dialogue, we have all been able to get an idea about the critical situation in which the German army found itself, and what was the thinking of the German generals who commanded the last units of the army. The book that we have used for this program has been the Memoirs of Raus himself, that I am showing you here. We say goodbye here. Many thanks to everyone, especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and see you in the next one. See you soon.